If you've played any set 8.5 at all, you would know that currently there is a hacker infestation. It feels like in each lobby, there's 3 to 4 Warwick players, and sometimes you'll even see a hacker Lulu come in and one-shot your carry. My name is Garchompro, I've been challenger since set 2, and what I'd like to talk about today is how to position versus hackers in order to farm those pesky hacker Warwick players, as well as hacker Draven players and whatnot. Now, there is going to be a B patch very soon that will be nerfing hacker, however hacker will still work the same way, it'll just have different breakpoints. So being able to position versus hacker will still be important, even if it's a bit less meta in the B patch. So without further ado, let's get into the positioning techs you can do to beat hacker. So the first tech I want to talk about is going to be useful versus melee hackers. We'll be using Warwick as an example. So assume this Warwick is the enemy's Warwick and every other unit on the board is ours. What we can do is we can corner the Jhin and full clump around it like this, putting the ranged units right next to Jhin and then melee units on the outside. No matter where Warwick jumps, your Jhin should be safe here. If it jumps over here on the right side, your Silas Camille will walk up and it'll start auto-attacking those and get dragged to the front line. And if it falls to the left here, again, the Viego Leona will walk up and it'll get dragged up with those onto all your melee units. Morgana is a really good tech in order to deal with assassins as well, due to the fact that she CCs the 2 nearest units on her ult, and she'll pretty much always ult every fight. So she is an ideal way to help beat hackers, although it doesn't have to be a Morgana here. This could be a melee unit or any random ranged unit as well. Now there's a few disadvantages of this positioning. The first and foremost is the fact that Jhin here is obviously susceptible to getting blitzhooked. You can fix that by simply just putting Jhin right here, and it should be generally safe. You may want to move the Alistar down here if you're doing that, but otherwise it should be good if you're going to be getting blitzhooked. And the other disadvantage, which is more major, is the fact that your comp is very, very susceptible to AoE, right? If there's a Nico Janna player in your lobby, they're just going to come in and one-shot your entire board. So if you have multiple people in your rotation and someone has strong AoE, this positioning is not going to be ideal. So what we're going to try and do is declump a little while still keeping ourselves safe. What we can do is position something like this, with Jhin in the corner right here and the 4 melee units right here positioned like this. With, of course, frontline in the front, so that way units don't collapse onto your backline. Now, you may notice here that I actually have this Vex on the other side, not next to the Jhin. And here's the reason why. I want to declump as much as possible in this positioning, so I'm not going to be throwing Vex like this. It would be bad to throw Vex right here due to the fact that what may happen is if the Warwick jumps where this Viego is, the Viego may walk up, the Warwick lands here, decides to start autoing the Vex, and after killing the Vex, goes into Vex's Hex and starts killing our Jhin, which is no good. So what we prefer to do is put 2 melee units so that way this won't happen. What will happen instead is the Viego will walk up, the Leona will walk as well, and wherever the Warwick lands, it's going to start auto-attacking one of our melee units and get stuck on our front line. Keeping our Jhin safe, it'll typically get dragged upwards. So this positioning here is good. Obviously, you're still susceptible to Blitzhook. You can't really deal with it this way because if you position Jhin like this, the Warwick can get onto your Jhin, so you have to clump even further. Again, you could put Vex here in position like this if you have a Blitzhook in your rotation, but then we're back to the positioning from earlier. This positioning obviously still gives us somewhat susceptible to AoE, but most of our units in this clump are going to be melee, so they'll typically walk up and we should usually be okay. It's a bit better than clumping everything together in the same side. One important unit with this positioning that I'd like to talk about is if you can run it, Leona is fantastic. Especially if you can get a Protector's Vow on her, she will be fantastic. What's going to happen is if you put her pocketed in here, kind of trapped behind your other units, she's rarely going to be the first targeted. Here usually the Viego will be the first targeted. And Leona will then walk over to the hackered Warwick and start auto-attacking him. After a couple autos with a Protector's Vow, she'll ult the Warwick and potentially just one-shot it. So Leona's a fantastic unit to help you burst down their carry, because that's one of the most important things. You always want to make sure you have some sort of single target burst, so a unit like Twisted Fate is great at that as well. But Leona's a great tech in order to deal with hacker players due to the fact that she can easily burst down the carry if she's pocketed like this to guarantee that she goes on to the Warwick. Now, if we want to not clump at all, what we can actually do is a positioning like this, where we have our front line up here, grouped up in line, and then we have our Jhin in one corner alone, and then any other ranged units in the other corner, and a melee unit in the middle. Now, this positioning is obviously susceptible to the fact that your opponent can simply just send the Warwick on the Jhin, so if the Warwick goes into one of those 2 hexes, your Jhin is dead. So you're running the risk of that, but the nice thing about this positioning is that we are completely AoE immune. And if the Warwick jumps into the middle or the left side, our Jhin should be completely safe. Obviously, if it jumps to the left side, it's going to kill the Vex and then walk back up to the front line. which is completely safe. And what will happen is if your opponent is defaulting middle and the Warwick jumps middle, what's going to happen is your Viego will walk up like this, the Warwick will land here, and now the Warwick will path onto the Viego, and they'll start autoing each other. And then, after the Viego is dead, the Warwick is closer to the front line than the Jhin, so it'll path back up to the front line in this case. So again, if the Warwick is full-sided, you're still susceptible, but if the Warwick is in the middle, you want to be putting a melee unit right here. Now, we want to make sure this ranged unit isn't down here, because if the ranged unit is down here, it's very possible that the Warwick walks up like this, and then paths back onto the Vex, and then onto the Jhin after killing the Vex, which is bad for us. In addition, we don't want a ranged unit down here, because if the Warwick jumps down to this hex right here and kills the Vex, it'll path immediately onto the Jhin afterwards. So ranged units should all be on the far side, and a melee unit in the middle. Weirdly, it's actually safer to position like this than to position this, even though we feel a bit more clumped around the Jhin due to the fact that it's less likely the Warwick will path onto the Jhin in this scenario. That being said, it's also completely fine to put other melee units down here as well. We could tech down a Leona or whatnot, and the Warwick should drag onto these. What you want to do is make sure you have some frontline blocked here. That way, the Warwick, after killing the Viego Leona, gets dragged up to your frontline. Obviously, if your frontline is super far away, there's a chance that the Warwick, if it paths like this, will then path back to the Jhin. So make sure you just have some tanky frontline in the middle to deal with the Warwick. Of course, any melee hacker could be a stand-in for Warwick here. The pathing should be the same. So if there's another melee hacker like Camille giving you trouble, these positioning techs should also work. Now, people aren't just hackering melee units, they're also hackering ranged units. So for example, for ranged units, we're going to be using the most common example, which is Draven. Now, the thing with current ranged hackers is that they will always prioritize hitting units on the back row at their first auto attack. After they kill the unit, they will then hit the unit that's closest to them, but on their first kill, they'll always go for a unit on the back row. What this means is that let's say we clump around our Jhin like this, and the Draven gets hackered onto the back line. Again, assume this is the enemy Draven, and it lands right here. Now, we'd normally assume is that the Draven will auto-attack either the Riven, the Wukong, or the Rel, due to the fact that they're the closest to the Draven, which would typically be true. But with the way Hacker is currently implemented, the Draven will actually either auto the Vex or the Jhin, as the Garen will walk up, and these will be the only two units on the back row. What this means is that clumping a bunch of melee units around our carry isn't going to be helpful to deal with ranged hackers. So we can essentially just move these frontline units up here. Now, what we can do, though, is use a ranged unit to body block, right? Because the Draven will still go for the closest unit on the back row. So if the Draven jumps middle, which people usually default to having their Draven jump in the middle, it will then auto-attack the Vex here, which should buy us a bit of time for Jhin. However, here, after it kills the Vex, it's obviously going to start auto-attacking the Jhin again, which is problematic. If the Draven was over here, it'll auto the Vex and then go onto the front line. But if it was in the exact middle right here, it'll auto the Vex, kill the Vex, and then go back onto the Jhin. So what are some things we can do to help deal with this? Well, the first thing we can do is we can run Ekko. Ekko is going to be fantastic due to the fact that it's going to taunt units. So what's going to happen is the Draven is going to start hitting this Vex here. And then once it kills the Vex, usually the Ekko will ult, and ult backwards into the enemy team. What this is going to mean is that the Draven is going to get taunted by the Ekko and start auto-attacking the Ekko, which buys time for us. It may also get dragged upwards a little bit. So this is going to be very good. Ekko is fantastic at dealing with ranged attackers as long as you have a little bit of time to buy for your Jhin. In addition, we can make this even better by putting two melee units down here. What's going to happen now is the Viego and the Leona are going to walk up a bit. And then because we have our front line blocked off like this, the Viego and Leona don't want to path all the way around to get to the enemy's front line. They're going to see that Draven is the closest unit to them. So they're going to walk backwards and get on the Draven. Again, the Draven is going to target the Vex here first. It's just the closest unit on the back rank. So it's going to target the Vex, kill the Vex. But now the Leona and Viego are the next closest to it. And again, after its first kill, it doesn't care about prioritizing the back row. So it's going to start auto-attacking the Viego and Leona, which should buy us even more time. Again, if we have an Ekko, that's even more time we're buying. So this should buy us plenty of time for our Jhin. Of course, since the Draven is on the opposite side of the Jhin, this positioning is extremely safe, as it'll maybe kill the Vex here and then go onto the front line as it's far away from the Jhin. The one weakness, though, is if the Draven jumps directly onto the Jhin, there is no real fix with this positioning. There's no way we can deal with this. So we have to get a little more creative in order to deal with the Draven that could potentially jump directly onto our carry. Because obviously with the melee carry, we were able to clump around it, but as I showed earlier, clumping around isn't going to cause any help due to the fact that the Draven will still auto-attack our backline. So what we can do instead is position something like this. Now, if you notice here, I have Jhin on the second row, which means that the Draven is not going to prioritize attacking it. Instead, it's going to prioritize attacking this ranged Vex on the back row. So wherever Draven jumped, it's going to auto attack the Vex first. If it jumps middle here, it's going to auto the Vex, and then your front line's going to walk up probably like this, and then it's going to get stuck on the front line. If the Draven jumps over here in front of your team, which people usually won't do because this is a little weird, again, it'll target the Vex first, and then as your front line walks up like this, the Draven will then target them because they're closer to it than the Jhin. So this positioning here should be safe versus a Hacker Draven. Obviously, this positioning has weaknesses due to the fact that we're clumping and then we're putting the Jhin on the second row, which we usually don't want. But this is very strong if, let's say, you're in a 1v1 versus the Draven player. You can go something like this to guarantee that the Draven's not going to target onto your Jhin. In addition, this ranged unit here in this Vex slot doesn't have to be a ranged unit. You could actually make it Fiddlesticks due to the fact that Fiddle won't move at the start of fight, meaning it stays on the back row. So you can kind of throw Fiddle wherever you want in this back row. The Draven will always target it first instead of the Jhin due to the fact that Jin's on the next row. And then again, as these units walk up and clump around, the Draven will then aggro onto them after killing the Fiddlesticks. So your Jhin should be safe with this positioning. If you're positioning like this, of course, a great unit to play is Janna due to the fact that she'll benefit from the fact that you are already clumping all your units. You may want to throw like another frontliner here to be like extra safe because you don't want the Draven to aggro onto the Janna than the Jhin. But honestly, even if you don't play the extra Blitzcrank here, I believe it'll typically, even if it aggroes onto the Janna, it'll aggro to the front line after the Janna. So you should be generally safe with this positioning right here. So again, this makes our carry a bit weaker, but it's strong due to strong into ranged hackers specifically. So if you know you're into one, this is a great tech in order to beat it. And at the end of the day, if all else fails, what you can do is you can just simply hacker your own carry. Of course, their hackered carry can't kill your carry if your carry is being hackered. Now, this is a little risky. You typically want to be doing this only if you have healing on your carry due to the fact that they'll go into the enemy team and take some focus fire and damage. And you also want to make sure you have a strong front line that won't just collapse immediately and have their team collapse onto your carry once it's in their back line. But this is a completely viable option for some carries if you want to deal with a hackered unit. It's hackering yourself, of course, because then they won't be able to get killed. That's pretty much it in terms of positioning tricks I have, so use these if you want to help beat the hacker units. Thank you for watching this video. I have a couple other videos coming along the way. I kind of wanted to just record this real quickly in order to go over this because I know hackers have been giving people a lot of pains recently. And so make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more videos and leave a comment of any video suggestions you have, as if you have any good video suggestions, I will definitely do them. Thank you for watching.